In the middle of Southern California's desert, there is a sea that was never supposed to exist. Surrounded by dry mountains and endless sand, its silent shoreline stretches for miles beneath a hazy sky. At first glance, it looks peaceful, almost like any other lake resting quietly beneath the desert sun. But the air carries a strange smell, a reminder that something here is slowly going wrong. Abandoned buildings stand frozen in time, silent reminders of a place that once promised a bright future. Dead fish cover parts of the beach, and every year the water retreats a little farther. At the beginning of the 20th century, developers dreamed of turning California's harsh desert into fertile farmland. To make that dream possible, engineers diverted water from the powerful Colorado River. For a short time, the plan seemed to work. Crops began growing where only sand had existed before. But in 1905, heavy flooding placed enormous pressure on the irrigation system. The canals could no longer contain the river, and water began breaking through the earthen barriers. For nearly 2 years, the Colorado River flowed unchecked into the desert. When the flood was finally stopped, a massive inland sea had been created, the Salton Sea. What began as an accident soon became an opportunity, as people imagined a new future along the shores of the Salton Sea. By the 1950s, visitors were arriving from across California, drawn by recreation in the middle of the desert. New marinas, resorts, and waterfront communities appeared along the shoreline, transforming the area almost overnight. Families came to boat, swim, fish, and enjoy weekends beside the water. Developers called it the future Riviera of California, convinced its popularity would continue to grow. Tourists and wealthy travelers helped fuel the excitement, bringing attention to the growing destination. For a brief moment, the future looked bright, and many believed the Salton Sea was destined for success. But beneath the calm water, a hidden problem was already growing, one that would eventually change everything. The Salton Sea had one problem from the very beginning. The water had nowhere to go. Unlike most lakes, no river carried water back out of the basin. Year after year, water continued flowing into the Salton Sea. But with no natural outlet, almost all of it left only through evaporation. As the water disappeared, the salt stayed behind, making the sea a little saltier every year. At the same time, fertilizers and other pollutants from nearby farms were also collecting in the water. Over time, the changing water conditions began putting enormous pressure on fish and wildlife. The sea still looked alive on the surface, but the damage was already beginning to spread. The paradise people had built was still standing, but the countdown to its decline had already begun. By the 1970s, the Salton Sea was beginning to reveal the true cost of its existence. Fish started dying in numbers no one had seen before, washing onto beaches that had once been filled with tourists. The smell of decay spread through the air, turning a vacation destination into a place many people no longer wanted to visit. Families stopped coming, hotel rooms stayed empty. The crowds that once defined the Salton Sea simply disappeared. Businesses closed their doors, marinas fell quiet, and the dream of a desert paradise began to unravel. The shoreline became a haunting reminder of how quickly prosperity can fade. What had once been promoted as California's Riviera was now struggling to survive. And the worst part, this was only the beginning of the disaster. As the Salton Sea continued to shrink, an even more dangerous threat began to emerge from beneath the water. By the time the wind returned, it no longer felt natural. It felt like something being dragged across the land. The dry lakebed of the Salton Sea had begun to speak in dust. Scientists warned that these airborne particles could carry harmful chemicals deep into nearby communities. What once reflected sunlight like a mirror was now a cracked, endless floor of salt and decay. Every step near the shoreline released particles that had been buried for decades. doctors and researchers began noticing unusually high rates of respiratory illness in the region. For many residents, the Salton Sea was no longer just a fading landmark. It had become part of everyday life. Yet despite the growing warnings, meaningful action came slowly, and the crisis continued to deepen. And while the world looked away, the Salton Sea continued drifting toward an even greater tragedy. Then, in 1996, the Salton Sea delivered a warning the entire country could no longer ignore. More than 10,000 pelicans, along with thousands of other birds, died in one of the largest wildlife die-offs in modern American history. Investigations soon pointed to a deadly combination of bacteria and rising salinity, creating toxic conditions throughout the lake. For many Americans, it was the first time they realized the Salton Sea wasn't just disappearing, it was dying. But even after the headlines faded, the communities surrounding the Salton Sea were still living with the consequences every single day. But the Pelican Tragedy wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of an even deeper collapse. By 1999, millions of tilapia began washing ashore, covering the Salton Sea's beaches in scenes few Americans could believe. The die-off became so overwhelming that bulldozers were brought in to clear the beaches. Even places like Bombay Beach, once built on dreams of paradise, were beginning to lose their shine. As conditions worsened, leaders promised that the Salton Sea would not be forgotten. But as the years passed, progress moved far slower than the communities had hoped. For the families who stayed, the uncertainty never truly disappeared. Even now, residents, volunteers, and conservation groups continue fighting for the future of the Salton Sea. The story of the Salton Sea isn't just about a lake. It's about how easily we forget the places we once loved. Because paradise doesn't disappear all at once. It fades quietly, while people convince themselves there's still time.